Most hotels rise toward the sky. This one was built in the opposite direction, down the wall of an abandoned quarry toward water, weathered rock, and the deepest part of an industrial scar. In Songjiang, on the southwestern edge of Shanghai, the InterContinental Shanghai Wonderland occupies a pit that reaches roughly 88 meters below the surrounding ground. From the entrance, the building appears surprisingly low. Only 2 levels rise above the rim. The remaining floors descend inside the quarry, arranged along a curved facade that faces the exposed rock and the lake below. That simple description is already more extraordinary than many of the images circulated online. Some show an impossible circular city buried in a vast natural canyon. Others place futuristic towers directly beside the rim or turn every room into a transparent underwater chamber. The real hotel is less fantastical and far more interesting. It is not hidden inside solid earth. It is attached to the inner wall of a former quarry, where 16 levels extend below the natural surface, and the building must negotiate rock, water, gravity, weather, and access at the same time. The quarry was not a romantic landscape waiting to be discovered. It was a man-made void left by extraction. Engineering studies described an approximately elliptical pit, about 280 meters from east to west and 220 meters from north to south. Its deepest point was 88 meters below the rim, and sections of the cliff approached an angle of 80 degrees. Years of exposure had weathered the rock face and opened fractures that mattered far more than appearance. A conventional developer might have filled part of the pit, flattened the site, or kept the building safely away from the edge. The proposal chosen in 2006 did the reverse. The design associated with architect Martin Jochman, first developed with Atkins and later continued through Jade plus QA, treated the quarry itself as the organizing structure. The hotel would not erase the void. It would occupy it. The form follows that decision. 2 curved guest room wings bend across the quarry wall. Between them, a glazed vertical core carries lifts and circulation, visually echoing falling water. At the rim, a low profile and planted roof reduce the amount of building visible from the surrounding landscape. Below, repetitive balconies create a measured human scale against the cliff. What looks from a distance like a single sculptural object is actually a complicated set of structures meeting at different elevations. But architecture could begin only after the quarry was treated as an engineering problem. The cliff stood more than 80 meters high, and parts of the future building would come within about 1 meter of the rock. Loose material, weathered zones, fractures, and the response of the slope during an earthquake all had to be studied. Anchoring support was not decorative. It was part of the condition that allowed people and a large occupied structure to exist beside the cliff. Engineers used 3-dimensional analysis to examine how the rock slope might move under normal loads and seismic forces. The objective was not to make the quarry perfectly still. No geological mass is perfectly still, but to keep movement within safe limits. Stabilization measures, rock anchors, protective work, monitoring, and carefully sequenced construction turned an exposed industrial wall into a managed boundary. The building itself also behaves differently from a tower on an ordinary site. The main structure inside the pit is fixed into bedrock near the bottom, while upper connections and spanning elements engage the rock at the rim. Technical research describes a 2-point support system with characteristics closer to a structure held between distinct conditions than to a simple stack of floors resting on flat ground. Steel frames, bracing, concrete slabs, tower sections, and top trusses had to work together while construction loads changed step by step. That sequence mattered. A structure this deep could not be assembled as though the quarry floor were a normal city street. Materials, workers, equipment, and concrete had to travel into a confined pit. When concrete is dropped through an extreme vertical distance using ordinary methods, its heavier aggregate can separate from the cement mixture. The result may arrive at the bottom no longer uniform enough for reliable structural work. To solve this, the project developed specialized equipment for ultra-deep downward concrete delivery. Instead of treating gravity as a convenient chute, the system controlled the material as it descended. This single logistical problem reveals the central paradox of the hotel. Every ordinary construction task became unusual because the work site was below the access point. Water created another set of contradictions. A quarry naturally collects rainfall and runoff. The lake at the bottom became part of the final composition, but water could never be treated only as scenery. Drainage, pumping, waterproofing, controlled levels, and emergency planning were necessary because the lowest occupied spaces sit where water wants to gather. In a conventional hotel, water is supplied to the building. Here, it also had to be kept from becoming the building's greatest threat. The completed complex turns that risk into experience. Rooms look across the void rather than outward toward a normal horizon. Balconies face the rock wall, the artificial waterfall, and the water surface. The quarry becomes a vast interior courtyard, yet its scale remains geological. Guests can read drill marks, changes in stone color, vegetation entering fractures, and the vertical distance back to the rim. The most publicized spaces are the so-called underwater suites. Their reality is more precise than the mythology. The duplex arrangement places part of the suite around water level, while the lower living area is enclosed beside a controlled aquarium. Fish pass behind large glazing, producing the impression of a submerged room. It is not an unrestricted window into the cloudy quarry lake. The effect depends on separation, filtration, structural glass, maintenance, and an artificial aquatic environment designed for visibility. That distinction does not reduce the achievement. It explains it. The hotel's strongest illusion works because multiple systems remain hidden: aquarium life support equipment, waterproof barriers, structural supports, mechanical services, evacuation routes, drainage, and constant maintenance. Luxury appears effortless only after engineering makes the effort invisible. The quarry also influenced the building's environmental strategy. The planted roof, limited profile above the rim, orientation of rooms, shade from the rock, the thermal behavior of the quarry mass, and the lake's microclimate were used as passive design opportunities. The narrow space between building and cliff can buffer exterior conditions, while the form reduces the visual footprint compared with a conventional tower of similar room count. Yet the language of ecological healing deserves care. Reusing an abandoned industrial site is different from restoring it to a pre-industrial ecosystem. The project introduced a major hotel, artificial water features, landscape design, lighting, roads, mechanical systems, and tourism infrastructure. It gave the quarry a new function and reduced pressure to build a comparable resort on untouched land. But it also transformed the site into a highly managed commercial environment. The construction timeline reflects the difficulty. The project began as a design ambition in 2006. Engineering and site work developed over the following years, with formal construction advancing from 2009 and major work intensifying later. The main structure was topped out in 2016, and the hotel opened in 2018. More than a decade separated the first concept from operation, not because the exterior form was difficult to imagine, but because every junction between cliff, building, water, and access had to be made dependable. The finished hotel is therefore two stories at once. One is a luxury spectacle: curved glass, dramatic views, water shows, aquarium rooms, landscape terraces, and a building that seems to disappear into the ground. The other is a record of constraints: fractured rock, limited working space, seismic analysis, concrete delivery, structural sequencing, drainage, waterproofing, and the permanent obligation to monitor a complex site. That second story is what gives the project lasting value. The hotel does not prove that every abandoned quarry should become a resort. The cost, geometry, geology, climate, location, and commercial demand make this solution highly specific. But it demonstrates a broader possibility. Damaged industrial landscapes do not always have to be hidden, filled, or abandoned. Their existing form can become the starting point for architecture, provided the design accepts the site's real conditions instead of replacing them with an image. Most landmarks announce themselves by rising above everything around them. Shanghai Wonderland does the opposite. It occupies a void, leaves the rim comparatively quiet, and makes descent the central experience. The quarry remains visible. Its scar was not erased. It was framed, stabilized, commercialized, and given a second life. The result is not simply a hotel beneath the ground. It is a building shaped by the fact that the ground had already been removed.